Hey, this is D Knight.
This is Carol.
This is Ty.
You're listening to the pod.
Ty, you forgot your line and then you threw off D. You're listening to the part in the Insurrection podcast where we often remember the name of our show.
Ty, you've muted yourself.
Wah, wah, wah.
Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
She's like, what a funny string of sounds.
No, I was like, this is Ty.
D is talking nonsense again.
All right, that was the blooper reel. Let's start over. 3, 2. Hey, this is D Knight.
This is Carol.
This is Ty.
We're listening to the Pardon the Insurrection podcast, where unfortunately, they're really going to pardon the insurrectionists, and the Supreme Court is out here turning America to a dictatorship. And
I didn't even realize that was so apropos. Pardon the insurrection.
Yeah,
maybe that's.
All right, guys, it's been a rough week. As you're well aware, it's been endless, nonstop disaster after disaster. I mean, the world's not technically ending, but they're stacking up.
Technically.
Yeah, we're on our way. The dominoes are all lined up for everything to fall, and American democracy goes splat. In case you missed it, the Supreme Court basically destroyed the way federal government works from here on out. I mean, 60 years of precedent gone like that. Technically, however many years of American jurisprudence has existed, that's also gone with the ruling on presidential immunity. We'll get to that in just a moment. Just endless, nonstop disaster after disaster. The Supreme Court, they took the gloves off. It's an all-out war. But first question here: now that Joseph Robinette Biden has been crowned king, should he or should he not launch a drone strike at the Supreme Court and start to undo this mess?
I'll allow it. I'm totally down.
In spite of all my facial expressions that you would see if you were on the YouTube, I am going to say I don't condone that.
You know, a winky face. Look, so the long story short of it,
I do.
I'll just, yeah.
I'm conflicted. Obviously, I don't want like a later tyranny, but do some tyranny to prevent tyranny. I don't know if it's a fallacy. It's definitely
all in favor of
catch-22
EOs all day. Executive order, executive order, executive order, like all day. I will allow it, because if he doesn't, we know exactly that Trump will. So fuck
right.
it.
All right. Before we get to that, so what the Supreme Court did here is after Trump's numerous appeals that made their way up to the Supreme Court about presidential immunity as it pertains to his January 6th case, the Supreme Court came out and basically said immunity exists in basically two buckets, and there's a third bucket of activity that's not covered by immunity. First of all, core presidential powers, those are the things explicitly listed in the Constitution. Those acts such as appointments or the pardon power, negotiating with foreign actors and foreign states and whatnot, all that, blanket immunity. There's nothing piercing that. In the second larger bucket, it's this idea of official presidential acts. Now that could technically be anything, because of the way the conservatives on the Supreme Court ruled in 6-3 fashion, that basically anything the president does on his job has the presumption of immunity, which basically means if, say, you wanted to prosecute a former president or current president for their behavior, the presumption of immunity for anything that they do is official part of their job. The prosecution would have to overcome that. But unfortunately, they also made it nearly impossible to do that, because they ruled as part of they held as part of the ruling. I can't speak. It's like midnight. That any of those official acts can't be used in evidence of court and can't be used as evidence of state of mind, mens rea. There's also the third bucket, the personal acts, like non-official acts, but the way the Supreme Court basically described presidential acts, you're the president all the time. So anything you do basically as
official acts.
Yeah, official acts is anything you do in your free time is basically an official act. And that's the short of it. Like,
because you're full-time president.
yeah, basically. Now, if you would like more in-depth legal analysis in terms of
fewer official acts and actual work fewer official acts and less work than like any other president I could think of, because I'm not thinking that
Well,
hard.
apparently this immunity thing is because the previous 43 presidents haven't been able to do their job, apparently, according to Trump, because they didn't have immunity.
Okay.
There's always the one person who comes and ruins it. Like, they didn't have to make a rule about it. And then like one guy came along and you're like, dude, we had so much immunity. Knock it off. But then that guy also was like,
if you want in-depth legal analysis of the specific ruling, you know, there's plenty of legal podcasts out there that you can check out for that. My guys at Midas Touch, you can go check them out. My girl, Melissa Rhodes, she does this fantastic podcast, Clean Up on Aisle 45 with Pete Struck, and go check that out. There's plenty of other people. We don't need to get into that as much as we need to get into the implications of the Supreme Court ruling. So first of all, the trial in DC is not going to happen, or at least not within the next year in all likelihood. Yeah. So the way the Supreme Court ruling panned out, it's going to be a hearing in DC about what evidence in that indictment consists of presidential acts and whether or not they meet the standard for the limited presidential immunity. Whatever the finding is, that's going to be appealed back up to the Supreme Court, which means another 6 months waiting on the Supreme Court justices to take up that case and make a ruling, and probably in such a way that'll help Trump yet again. So, you know, cancel that trial taking place before the election. I know it's tough. We're going to get there. Also, the Florida documents case, because literally no one asked, but Clarence Thomas found himself poking around at the idea of the appointment of a special counsel being unconstitutional. That was some bait for Judge Cannon down in Florida to basically toss out that case on the idea that it'll be appealed up to the 11th Circuit, which will likely get it removed, but I'm sure that'll be appealed up to the Supreme Court. And if Thomas suggested it, that likely means that despite the previous Supreme Court rulings where it's been established multiple times that the appointment of a special counsel is constitutional, the Republicans on the Supreme Court probably throw that out too. So look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a fucking disaster. Again, don't lose hope. We're going to get there. Also, Trump's New York, the New York civil fraud trial, rather, the New York election interference / hush money case, where Trump was found guilty on 34 criminal counts. That sentencing has been postponed until September, obviously to deal with the implications of the Supreme Court ruling. But I do have some good news in that regard. This likely won't affect that in any degree whatsoever. I mean, Trump's going to try and claim it will. It's really most of the evidence presented in that case was before Trump was ever president, and the checks that he signed while he was in office, that's not an official act. And apart from some testimony from Hope Hicks, which may possibly slightly to some degree maybe fall into the realm of like a conversation with the administration official that could be protected.
You sound really confident about it. Maybe, possibly, sort of.
Look, again, so if you're a lawyer listening to this podcast, I don't know why you're listening to us because we're not fucking lawyers, but
one of us is, but I don't know what I'm here for the comic relief.
Yeah, Kara, I didn't mean to speak for you.
Wait, you're a lawyer?
I was speaking for me mostly there, but the idea of having practiced law for the entirety of your career, and then you wake up one day and the Supreme Court does this, everything that previously existed in terms of like regulatory law, that's all out of the window. And in terms of criminal law, as it pertains to prosecuting, it's some totally new shit. They just invented law out of thin air. It's a totally new, unexplored field, and there's going to have to be just numerous instances of establishing the limits of presidential immunity. Sorry, it's some brand new shit. No one really knows. And then given the fact that the Supreme Court's clearly in Trump's bag, they can kind of make this up as they go along.
Yeah, now it's just going to be remanded to whatever fucking court is, you know,
and then it'll
gets
end
to
up
decide
being,
whether or not it's an official act.
Mark Elias, who said something, or maybe it was Chris Hayes, but he was like, it was a nonsense case. So what they did was they took this case and then figured out arguments to make the fucking case work in their favor. Like, that's basically what they did.
Specifically, what they did is they looked at all of the criminal issues facing Trump and did their best to gerrymander their argument in such a way that would help Trump in every possible instance without basically coming out and saying presidents have full immunity.
Yeah.
Because the way it was argued by the Supreme Court, presidents technically at this point now have full immunity. The only thing stopping the United States from being subject to a dictatorship at this point is just the values and I don't know, just
I just need Joe to start slanging that pen like it's an AR-15. Like,
listen,
that's it.
What's
Did you say
saving us?
pen or peen?
Pen.
The thing that's saving American
Not
democracy
making fun of your accent.
from
I'm asking
being
if you said
subject to a
peen.
dictatorship is the character of the person holding in the office. And that's why it's so important in the November election that we re-elect Joe Biden. Because Joe Biden out here, he just said it. He don't want to be a king. Trump does. And you've seen all of the things Trump's promising to do in his second term. He's going to like round up people and he's going to have the Department of Justice go after his enemies. And he's going to have complete and total immunity to do so. And
I don't need Joe to be a king. I just need him to act like one for the next 127 days.
Yes. Agreed.
Fair's fair. Okay. That's it.
But again, now we joke about this, but the Supreme Court did basically rule that as long as President Biden is speaking to one of his, administration officials, he could technically order SEAL Team 6 to go assassinate the Supreme Court justice.
Well, was that not just the dissent?
Yes, that was actually part of this. Actually, in fact, it was part of the
Sotomayor's dissent.
The reason why it was in the dissent to begin with is because Trump's lawyers argued it in front of the Supreme Court. Initially.
Exactly. And that's what people forget when they're like, oh, it's like someone had said, I don't know, some troll, and they were like, oh, she should be disbarred just for saying this. It was like, the whole reason that she said that is because during the oral arguments, when she asked, so you're saying he can order SEAL Team 6 to go and assassinate? And Trump's lawyer was like, yeah.
Don't forget to hold your mic up.
Yeah. Yeah.
We see that bottle, again? Girl.
Oh.
Please don't get hammered. You're on a 1-drink maximum. You're cut off.
Okay, well, I've got a tiny little cup here. So
pardon the insurrection bar. No more. You're done.
This is my last one. But
look, I get it. After the past week that we just had, I need a drink as well.
Yes, like it was a harrowing week. It was so fucking depressing. It was like ruling after ruling after ruling after ruling, back to back to back to back. And we knew that this was coming. We knew that they were going to rule in favor, but it was still just that maybe sliver of hope that
well, we didn't know it was going to be this bad.
Us.
I thought it would be bad. I didn't know it would be this horrifying. And
that they would say the shit that they said, like it is. And I had a friend on Facebook because I try to alert people on Facebook to what's, and she's like, oh, they're just remanding it to the states. And I go, no, that's not what they're fucking doing.
Remanding what to the states?
I was like, you need it.
But they don't know what the it is, it sounds like.
His eligibility to...
Well, that was the 14th Amendment issue, which they took away from the states, to be honest. And anyway, the decision's horrifying. Again, there's nothing protecting us in a second Trump administration, and I think that's fairly clear. And I think what's most horrifying is if you think about it, like at this point, a second Trump administration, he could use the intelligence services to go after Americans, be free of immunity, use the Justice Department to investigate his political rivals. If you want to protest, he can have the National Guard just go out and shoot people, something that he suggested before while he was in office. Obviously, at that point in time, there were people to stop him. But his real question, well, when he asked, the response was, but you could be prosecuted for that. And his response to that was by who? Well, now the answer to that question is no one. No one can prosecute him.
Exactly.
Yeah. The Supreme Court has basically made it impossible to prosecute a president for conspiring.
So now, and then let's just note that not one person there was like, because it's wrong. Okay, just clean. Of course, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, obviously,
I'm just spitballing here, but maybe because that's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, just throwing that out there.
The thing is, the president now has blanket immunity to conspire with administration officials to overthrow the government, and that's the broad strokes of it. And it's fucking horrifying. I mean.